What's up, guys? Another fun Elixir Getting Started guide live stream. We're going to be doing the module attributes today, so that'll be fun. I don't know if chat works. Let's find out. We'll find out right now. There's a little bit of a delay. Hey, what's up, Sasha? Hey, and chat is working. That's exciting. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into the guide. Let me open up Firefox here. And I will change my screen over. All right, cool. And we'll head over to elixirlang.org and then the guides. And we are, let's see, down here. Man, we're making a good dent on these docs, module attributes. All right. All right. I feel like whenever I start these, I got to take a deep breath because I'm about to be reading for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. All right, module attributes. Module attributes in Elixir serve three purposes: as module and function annotations, as temporary module storage to be used during compilation, as compile time constants. So let's check these examples. As annotations, Elixir brings the concept of module attributes from Erlang. For example, all right, we need to create, we need code here. I'll make this a little bigger. CD to the desktop, mix new attributes, CD into that project, and then let's open up VS Code. Close that. Okay. So we have a little example here. We'll just create a new file, and we will call this myserver.ex, and then we'll have our def module, my server. I'm going to put an underscore in here. It's going to drive me insane. There we go. All right, so we first have our, let's see, at module doc. So at module doc, and that is between, why am I blanking on this? What is the three double quotations called? Like herodox, something like that. Herodox. Well, anyways, we have our at module doc, and if it's a multiple line description for our document, this is used for documentation of our code. We don't have to have the triple double quotations. We can just have one line next to it, and we can say my server code, like their example. And let's see, in the example above, we are defining the module documentation by using the module attribute syntax. Elixir has a handful of reserved attributes, and here are a few of them. So we have at module doc, we have at doc, and they're always I'm pretty sure they're called herodox. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. How to pronounce herodox. Herodox. Okay. Herodox. That's what the triple double quotation is. It's just a herodoc, I think. I feel like they're going to tell us in the documentation. Anyways, I think it's herodox. You guys can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. All right, so here is an example. So we have at module doc, which we just saw, and this provides documentation for the current module. And then we have at doc, which provides documentation for the function or macro that follows the attribute. And then we have at spec, provides a type spec for the function that follows the attribute. And then we have at behavior. Notice the British spelling. I know they like to add extra letters, used for specifying an OTP or user-defined behavior. So at module doc and doc are by far the most used attributes, and we expect you to use them a lot. Elixir treats documentation as a first class, and it provides many functions to access documentation. We will cover them in their own chapter. It is really nice. If you leverage the module doc and doc, it makes generating documentation for your code a lot easier. And so let's jump in. Let's go back to our math module in the previous chapters and add some documentation and save it to the math.ex file. All right, so we're gonna recreate that because I no longer have that code, because I delete everything. All right, so we're going to just make our math.ex file, def module, math, and let's see, we're going to document the module here. So we're going to do at module doc, and inside of the here doc marks, we're going to say provides math dash related functions, and then we can even have some examples, and then tab that over IEX math.sum, put a space there, and that returns 3. That is the expected behavior. And then we can have our sum function here that takes 2 of our arguments, A and B, and then we're just going to add them together. And then above this, we can use our at docs attribute, and we can say calculates the sum of 2 numbers. All right. And I feel like, I don't know why they would have the example up in the docs, because we'll get into this later. We'll show it off today probably, just for a little bonus, because I don't think they touch on this, but there's a little thing called doc tests, and doc tests will actually run this example code. And if it doesn't produce the expected behavior, you'll get a failed test. And so whenever you have documentation written like this for a specific function, it's kind of like a test for free, and you're documenting your code when you use doc generators and things. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1. It's kind of like a little bonus. I'm going to delete that. I think it's weird to have an example in our module doc. All right, so Elixir promotes the use of Markdown with here docs to write readable documentation. Here docs are multi-line strings, okay, and that's what these triple double quotes are. Keeping the formatting of the inner text. We can access the documentation of any compiled directory any compiled module directly from IEX. So if we pull up our terminal here, let's clear this, and then we'll start our IEX shell. Let's see, we want to no, I can just do IEX. Why is this hurting my brain? Mix-s IEX, right? No, how do I do this? IEX-s, there we go. Yeah. Guys, I blame dyslexicness. I don't know. Okay, so when we're in our Elixir shell, we can now use the H for help, And if we call our math function or our math module, I think we just have, math, boom. And then we get our documentation for that module. So it provides math related functions. That's pretty cool. And then we can also say H for help, and we can do math.sum, and we get calculates the sum of two numbers, and we get our example in there. So that's pretty cool. So it provides a tool. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Elixir promotes the use of Markdown. Okay, I said that. We just ran these examples. We also provide a tool called XDoc, which is used to generate HTML pages from the documentation. So yeah, this is really cool. And like I was saying, as long as you stay on top of your documentation with examples, when you generate this, you have HTML pages with all your documentation and examples how to use it. Super beneficial. So you can take a look at the docs for module for a complete list of supported attributes. Elixir also uses attributes to annotate our code with Typespecs. As temporary storage, I feel like they're jumping around. Do we talk about Typespecs? No, we don't. I'm going to click on that then. Okay, so let's go to module, and we can see the module attributes. So we have after compile, after verify, before compile, behavior. You guys can run through this and see what everything does here. I think we touch on behavior. I thought I saw that when I looked. Type doc, where's type spec? That's not what I want. Can I search this? Yeah. Can I do? Am I spelling it wrong? Types. Oh, wait, we have a clickable link, and here I am struggling. Let's go back to where we were. Typespecs. Boom, Typespec for reference. All right. So Elixir comes with notation for declaring types and specifications. This document is referenced into their uses and syntax. Elixir is a dynamically typed language, and as such, type specifications are never used by the compiler to optimize or modify code. Still, using type specifications is useful because they provide documentation. For example, tools such as XDoc show type specifications in the documentation. They're used by tools such as the, I'm going to say this wrong, the dialyzer, and can analyze code with type specs and to find type inconsistencies and possible bugs. So it is super useful. Type specifications are defined in different contexts using the following attributes. So we can use @type, @opaque, @type p, @spec, @callback, @macro callback. In addition, you can use @type doc to document a custom type definition. And here is a simple example. We can do @spec. And so what is going on here is the spec here is showing us that the function takes a word function, and then this function returns a Boolean. So yeah, okay. Let's play around with this in the code. How's the job market of Elixir developer and demand, like competition? I mean, the job market, it's small. It's a very niche language, but the goal is, if you're starting projects and Elixir's a good fit, which I think like the Beam VM and everything is a good fit for a lot of web applications, if people just start writing their code bases in Elixir, it will help grow the job market. But it is, there are jobs, it is a little tough, but I think tech in general right now is a little tough. But yeah. Hey, dude, been learning Elixir work by watching your vids. Awesome, man. I love to hear that. All right, back to Typespecs. All right. So we can, above our sum function, we can do a type spec. So here they're, in this example, back here, they're declaring a new type word that is equivalent to a string type. So that's what at type would be, but we don't have to do that because we're just accepting integers, right? And then, so they're using at type to declare a new type, but it's just a string. And then it's returning, this function returns a Boolean. So basic types are integer. You can go through this on your own. I'm just going to do a quick example so you see how you can do it. So above our function here, we can do at spec, and we can just do sum, and inside of the parentheses, we would say integer, and then outside of this, we would do the double quotation or double colons and what we expect to get back. And in this case, we're not just taking an integer. It would take any number technically. So I guess we'll say it takes a float. Yeah, we'll say it takes a float. So float, and then it returns a float. Boom, boom. So that is how type spec works. Spec is undefined. It shouldn't be. At spec. Did I do something? My function, oh, my function is funky. Is that the problem? There we go. I somehow got parentheses in there. I have this error. I don't know when it happened, but it's having issues finding my formatter, I think. Unable to, so I don't know. I had to fix my language server. Something is going funky with things. Why is this undefined function at spec? I don't know why I'm getting this error, guys. I'm procrastinating by watching this, but since I'm procrastinating from reading through Elixir in action, exactly, Skid, we're reading documentation, so it's all good. Same dude, but I am in between projects at work and have nothing to do, so I am here to study Elixir in the meantime. I mean, Elixir's a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy yourself. I think you will enjoy being here. All right, I am really annoyed at typespec right now. Do math. I must have a typo somewhere. Or is it supposed to go inside? I don't think it goes inside my, that doesn't make sense. I don't know why it's not working, guys. I think it might be my linter problem or my language server problem. Dun, 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 dun. I'm not going to waste too much time on this. I'll have to do another video. Now I lost track of where type specs were. Back to the docs. We're going to read it a little longer. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. All right, type spec. I'm pretty sure we're doing it right. My language server or used to autocomplete type specs specs for me, I should say. And then I did something, or I broke something maybe, and it stopped working. So there's always that. At spec. I don't know, guys. We're going to just continue with the guide and not worry about this right now. Delete. We'll just pretend it wasn't an issue, because these things love to happen when float. Am I doing something wrong? Second args. Oh yeah, you're so right. I'm special, guys. Oh man. See. Okay. There we go. See guys, this is why going live just, everyone sees your true special needsness. That's probably not kosher to say live on a stream either, but I did. So there we go. Thank you guys. So there we go. That's how the spec attribute will work. You have to declare obviously both argument types, and that's what I was doing wrong. So, all right, back to the docs. That's enough of that. All right, so where was I? So you can take a look at the docs for module for a complete list of supported attributes. Elixir also uses attributes to annotate our code with Typespecs, and we just saw that. Well, we suffered through that a little bit. And it can also be used as is hard, and it's also special in heaven. Hey, at least we're all hanging out together. Yeah, no, there's two args. Thank you so much. As temporary storage. So far, we have seen how to define attributes, but how can we read them? Let's see an example. So you can provide attributes like at service here. So if we were to, let's see, we'll go right above, right underneath our, not our doc, underneath our module documentation. And if we're going to put in, use an attribute for storage, you can do things like this. You can name it anything you want. So we can call it service. And this could just be a URI, and then we could just parse any old URL. So HTTPS, we'll do elixirmentor.com, and there we go. And then if we inspect this, IO, I'm going to call this actually inside of a function so I have more control of it. So def call service, do end, and then we can just say IO inspect at service, and then we'll just return an OK atom. And if we jump back into our shell, we can just recompile. This is giving us a warning from this module. I'm going to just delete it. Okay. Now if we recompile, we shouldn't get errors. Cool. And now if I call math dot, what did I call my function? Call service, you get our URI struct back. Or yeah, this would be a struct. So this is kind of like the same thing as, so essentially what we can use, these are basically constants that are injected to your code at compile time. And you don't necessarily, like, we wouldn't want to, if we were using this as a constant all throughout our code, you wouldn't want to call this from multiple functions a bunch of different times. It's not efficient. And this would be the same thing as doing, I'm going to just copy this. So this is doing the same thing as creating our URI struct. And so we could just do this. Boom, same thing. But it's kind of nice that, we're just using the URI module, and it's parsing it for us to create the URI struct. All right, so do not add a new line between the attribute and its value. Otherwise, Elixir will assume you're reading the value rather than setting it. So if we shifted this down a line, it will read the value and not set it to the service attribute. All right, back to the docs. Trying to access an attribute that was not defined will print a warning. So in this case, if I return down a line and then we recompile, we should get a warning. Yep, undefined attribute service. There you go. And that is, so yeah, when you're setting attributes, the value needs to be next to them. That makes sense. All right, and trying to access an attribute that was, okay, we already said that, sorry guys. Attributes that can be read inside of functions can also be read. So, oh, I jumped ahead, guys. I already showed our example of doing this. So here we go. We read our attribute inside of a function, and then we called it, and it worked. So that is that. And the module attribute is defined at compilation time, and its return value, not the function call itself. I read that. The module attribute is defined at compilation time, and its return value, not the function call itself, is what will be substituted in for the attribute. So the above will effectively compile to this. Okay, yep, and that's what I showed you. So when you're calling it down in a function at compile time, it's basically at compilation time, it's the return value. So it is this. And so it's not a function that it's calling, if that makes sense. And so this can be useful for pre-computing values and then injecting its results into the module. This is what we mean by temporary storage. After the module is compiled, the module attribute is discarded, except for functions that have read the attribute. Note, you cannot invoke functions defined in the same module as part of the attribute itself, and those functions have not yet been defined. Every time we read an attribute inside a function, Elixir takes a snapshot of the current value. Okay, that says it way better than me. So you don't want to be using it multiple times throughout your module because it takes a snapshot. Therefore, if you read the same attribute multiple times inside of multiple functions, you end up increasing compilation times, as Elixir now has to compile every snapshot. Generally speaking, you want to avoid reading the same attribute multiple times and instead move it to a function. For example, instead of this, so let's just write a couple functions here. So instead of doing something like this, some function do, and then we're going to say, do something with, and then we're passing in our service. Okay, so that's one function, and then another function doing the same thing, calling our same attribute. Do something else with, and then send our attribute in. You don't want to do this because it's creating a new snapshot and then compiling it at each function call. So what they're saying is better to do is make one function. So we can make like a def p function called get service, and then we can just say do and return our service attribute. And then instead of doing this, we can just call our get service function up here. And then, whoops, get service. There we go. So we can just call our functions. So we have one snapshot of our attribute, and then it's stored now. It's compiled in this function, and we can call that function twice, and it's not creating more code that needs to compile. All right, so as compile time constants, module attributes may also be useful as compile time constants. Generally speaking, functions themselves are sufficient for this role of constants in code base. For example, instead of, and I'm guilty of this. I used to do this all the time. I used to always, like, I can't think of a specific example, but like with gen servers and things, I would always do like a heartbeat and put in my like whatever, however many milliseconds I wanted. Like maybe I did 10,000 milliseconds. I would always do things like this when you're actually better just creating a constant function called heartbeat and just returning that value here. So this is more efficient than this. All right, so you may even define a public function if it needs to be shared across modules. It's common in many projects to have a module called, your project constants that define all constants used throughout the code base. Yeah, yes and no. I don't. If you do have a lot of constants, this is what you want to do. It's nice to have them all in one spot, and then that way when they're changed, they're just changed in one area. But yeah, use this. Be very mindful of what you're making constants out of, because you don't want to just have constants for the sake of having constants. You can also have composite data structures as constants, as long as they are made exclusively of other data types, no function calls, no operators, and no other expressions. For example, you may specify a system configuration constant as follows. So here you're just creating a private function called system config, and you're returning a map with our time zone and the locale. So given data structures in Elixir are immutable, only a single instance of the data structure above is allocated and shared across all function calls, as long as it doesn't have any executable expressions. So yeah, that's good to say. That's good to know too. If you are creating constants, it's better to do the function call like this, and then this is only stored in memory in one place. So the use case for module attributes arise when you need to do some work at compile time and then inject its results into a function. A common scenario is a module attribute inside patterns and guards as an alternative to def guard, since they only support a limited set of expressions. All right, so let's see. Let's make sure. Noob question: what is the difference between a struct and a JS object? So an object is normally referred to as an object when it's a mutable thing, right? And I'm trying to give you a good answer here. So a struct in Elixir is a map with structure to it. So you'd have your key, you'd have your keys defined, right? So let me just pull up a good example here. So I'm like so much better at explaining things when I have something in front of me. So if we were to, where did my example go with the URI? Okay, so for example here, this URI, I'm going to just copy and paste this into our code so I can zoom in on it better. So in this case, we have a URI struct, and a URI struct will declare all the keys and types in them. So this would be declared as a string. Okay. And you would go through, you declare all your types. So it's similar to an object, but an object is mutable. So in like JavaScript, you can pass around a URI object. And if you change the value, you're passing it around with that changed value. So you could have multiple functions changing a value of whatever object it is, right? And in a functional language, you are transforming data. So there's only one copy, and when you transform it, a new copy is created, and then you're passing that around. So a struct is just a known structure. It's a map. I can't really say, it's not really an object. It is just, a struct is a structure to your immutable map of data. So like we can create a map here the same way, and it could just have a scheme and there's no structure to it. But the second you make it a declared struct, you know what keys belong to it. And I feel like I butchered that that. I think I like explained it poorly. Oh, being put on the spot. I don't know why I torture myself with these live stream guys. Let's see. I'm cheating, and I asked ChatGPT for a quick rundown so I can stop. Okay, yeah, I was kind of right. A struct is short for structure, so it is used to represent lightweight data structures, right? So a struct doesn't have data in it. Our in Elixir maps do. Okay, and then an object is an instance of a class, and that represents more complex data and structures, and you can pass around an object that actually holds values. Yeah. Okay, I feel like I'm rabbit holing, but I think I kind of answered that. Does that make sense, Werewolf? I think it's so weird talking to people with their handles. Werewolf. I just like imagine you crawling right now. Yeah. Data is expecting struct to structure. Yeah. Is the application of state a factor here? With, are you asking as far as like attributes go? Like attributes, there's no state with that. And there's no state when you pass around a map. Well, there's state with that, with the map that you're passing around, right? But there's not like persisted state. I don't know. You might have to explain what you mean a little more, Chris. Makes sense. And no worries. I would have asked ChatGPT. No, you're good, man. Now I forgot where I was. In regards to structs versus objects, structs are just so it is just a. I just literally so an object holds a copy of a class and can hold data and values, right? And then a struct is just a structure of how data can be represented. So it's kind of like a map to how you should create, and not an object, a struct. So yeah, I don't think state is, yeah, no, a struct is the structure of how you would structure the data that you're passing around. Yeah. I'm going to have to delete this live stream, guys. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, a struct is, well, a map is what object-oriented people would know as their object, right? So we're passing around a key value map, which is essentially a list of tuples, right, under the hood. And a struct is just the structure of what keys are expected to be in there. Yes. Yeah. I think we've figured this out together. A struct can be like a value paired data frame. Yeah, it's like the blueprints to how you would build a house. And then when you actually build the house, that is just like your map of data at that point. All right. So given data structures are immutable, only single instance of data structures above is allocated and shared across function calls. I feel like I read this already. All right. So now the use case of module attributes. I gotta look away from the chat for a second. The use case for module attributes arise when you need to do some work at compile time and then inject its results inside a function. A common scenario is module attributes inside patterns and guards as an alternative to def guard arity 1, since they only support a limited set of expressions. All right, so let's see what's going on here. Since they only support a limited set of expressions, module attributes as constants and as temporary storage are most often used together. The module attribute is used to compute and store an expensive value and then expose as a constant from that module. All right, so let's see what's going on here. So inside pattern, we have our at default time zone attribute. And then we have a shift function that takes that. And then we do work. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the example. And then we have our time periods and then shift, def shift. So inside guards, inside pattern. And then we take our time and our period. When period is in time periods. Time. I need to reread this. The use case for module attributes arise when you need to do some work at compile time, then inject the results inside of a function. A common scenario is module attributes inside patterns and guards as an alternative to def guard arity 1, since they only support limited set of expressions. Okay. So, all right, I think I understand what we're doing here. I'm a little slow to the party. All right. Let's pull up our code here. So I'm going to create a new module. I don't know what to call this. Let's call it module stuff.ex def module. Okay. So there's two cases for using a attribute, right? So we're going to have an attribute which is called default, if I can spell, time zone, and then we just set this to etc and then /utc, okay? And then at compile time, we can grab that in a function called shift, and we can just call it here, and then we can do stuff. And that's what this example is showing. And then they're showing how guards can also be used. And then so time periods, and time periods is a list of atoms. And in this case, we have an atom AM and an atom PM. And then, dude, I need to fix my whole dev environment. It is out of control. And then, so if we create a function called shift here, def shift, and then it takes time and period, when period, so we're using a guard here, is in at time periods. And then we can do stuff. All right, so do things. All right, so what they're showing us here is we have two functions that can pattern match. So one is just taking our attribute that's set, right? So this would kind of be our default time zone. So if shift is called without any parameters, boom, it pattern matches and would do this. It would call this function. If we call the same function with a specific time and period, it would pattern match to this function. And then what we're doing is, as long as period is in this list, it would perform this function. So we're able to call at time periods attribute at compile time when we call this function. So as long as period is AM or PM, this function would happen. So modules as constants and as temporary storage are most often used together. So the module attribute is used to compute and store an expensive value and then expose as a constant from that module. I kind of get this. I'm not seeing the benefit of using the attributes as constants in this case. I get it for the guard, but I don't get it for the pattern matching. Because you could just have a third declaration here for pattern matching to have our default. So we could say shift, I don't know, we could say, no, I'm not having a very good batting track record today, so I'm not gonna change the example off the cuff because I'm gonna butcher it. But like I feel like there would be better ways to write this. But it's fine. You guys get the point. The next section is a little more exciting, I think. And so let's see, going further. Libraries and frameworks can leverage module attributes to provide custom annotations. To see an example, look no further than the Elixir's unit test framework called XUnit. XUnit uses module attributes for multiple different purposes. So you'll see them use it as tags. So you can use tags here. So tests will only run under certain environments. So if you're running tests in a Unix environment, you can control that they'll only run there versus if this test would fail in a Windows environment, and then you're good to go, right? And what I want to show you, so in this example above, XUnit stores the value of async true in a module attribute to change how the module is compiled. Tags also work as annotations as they can be supplied multiple times, thanks to Elixir's ability to accumulate attributes. Then you can use tags to set up and filter tests, such as avoiding executing Unix-specific tests while running your test suite on Windows or something else. So to fully understand XUnit works, we'd need macros, so we'll revisit this pattern in Meta Programming Guide and learn how to use module attributes as storage for custom annotations. And I'm going to plug this again. If you don't want to wait for the meta programming, and we're going to be so macro level with the guides, check out my Elixir A Comprehensive Introduction. I do a really cool meta programming section or module there where we create our own domain-specific language for creating discounts and all that cool stuff. So we kind of jump into this stuff quite a bit, and it's pretty cool. And one thing I wanted to do, which isn't covered in this section, is talk about, so they talk about, I'm going to just delete stuff that's not going to work. But we talk about all these attributes like the @doc, @module doc, but they never talked about So our inline doc example here, if we wrote a test for this module here, we're going to delete this too. We're going to write a test for our sum here and run doc tests as well, so you can see how they work. And I know it's a little out of scope, but this whole live stream's kind of been out of scope, so we might as well do it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a test for our math.ex just like this. We need to use xunit case, and then we'll create our own little test here. So let's go ahead and create a new file. We'll say math_test.exs, and then we'll create our def module like that. And we need to, I already forgot, we need to use, because xunit.case is a macro. So we need to inject that. So we're going to use xunit.case here. All right. And then we're going to also say doc test and call our module. So doc test, and then call our module math. All right, so we have that. And then if you notice here, we're just going to write a simple test. We call the test, we name our test, and then inside of a do block, we can do our assertions for our test. So test, and we're going to say, I forgot, let's see, calculates the sum of two numbers. So calculates the sum of two numbers, and then do block, and then we're going to assert. And now here is what we do. We're going to call our function. So if we call our function math.sum, and let's say we'll pass in a 2 and a 3 for arguments. We want to match that, and we expect that to equal 5. So this function should equal 5, right? And if we go back to our example, we have a doc test with 1, 2, and we expect 3 back. So now if we go to, I'm going to clear this. We want to just be in our project, not in the IX shell. If we run mix test, you'll see that 2 doc tests were successful, 2 tests were successful, 0 failures. And so it's running the doc tests from attributes. So it's getting the hello world back. It's running a function or a test on hello and getting the Atom world back. And then our second test, so this is passing, which is really cool. And our doc test is passing. And I think this is the coolest part, because you wouldn't expect this to work, right? But if I change this value in our doc here to 4, and then save it, and we run our test suite again, we're going to get, look, we have a doc test failure, and our math.sum function is taking arguments 1 and 2 and expecting it to match 4, but the left side was 3 and the right side is 4. So it's actually telling us that one of our doc tests failed. And I think that's really cool. And I think that's a cool thing to know. And like I said, this doubles up as documentation for when you generate your docs, and it's a second test. So right here, we wrote a test for our function, and then we already had a test written and we didn't even know it, and it works. So I think that's really cool. And hopefully, running through that, allows you guys to forgive my butchering of this whole live stream. But so that is attributes for you. Module attributes. And like they said at the beginning, module doc and doc attributes are the most heavily used ones. And I used to use attributes all the time as constants. And then I realized that it's not that beneficial unless you're doing like heavy compilation. And you're really only going to run into that when you're writing macros and things. I could be wrong, but those are the only examples that I've seen where it really makes sense to use them. But Anyways, this was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for participating and saving me when I struggled with specs and all of that stuff. It was good. Thursday will be our next live stream, and we're jumping into structs. Look at that. We got asked about structs, and next we'll learn about them. So that'll be good. So that was module attributes. There is no live stream on Friday. I don't have a podcast because I'm going out of town. A good buddy of mine is getting married, and I got to put on the whole tux thing and go to Georgia for the weekend. So I have to leave early Friday. So Thursday will be my last live stream this week. And then the following week, we'll continue with these, of course. But we have Sasha coming on. Actually, let me double check my schedule. I don't want to make a promise and be wrong. Yeah, we have Sasha Urich, the inaction author. So that is going to, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. So that is going to be really cool. The struggle never ends. Thanks, Skid. It really doesn't. It doesn't. So I'm looking forward to the next podcast guest, because I think between him and Bruce Tate, those are the two books that I first was diving into when I was learning Elixir. So it's really cool to have them on as guests. So I'm excited. We are in this together. We're all learning together, and we're all learning how to read documentation together. And yeah, so guys, this was fun. I will see you guys on Thursday. Thank you so much, and peace out.
Enjoying the video? Show some love with a like and hit subscribe to stay updated. To support me and keep the content free, click join for memberships or pick up a course at elixirmentor.com and get free access to my private community. Let's jump back in.